Hi there. It's February the 28th, and we're still reading in Torah. We're in Leviticus, and Leviticus in Hebrew, Vayikra, that means he called because it begins with the words the Lord called. And we're in chapter 22 and chapter 23. The end of chapter 22 is really about bringing the Lord worthy offerings, offerings that are whole, not blemished. There might be a temptation if someone was bringing an offering to the Lord to say, well, this animal has something wrong with it. It's going to get burned up anyway. I'll just offer this to the Lord. But the Lord is saying, don't do that. I want offerings that are whole, offerings that are complete. I want you to bring the best of what you have, not the leftovers, not the scraps, not the things that you would throw away. That maybe speaks to us in these days about how we bring our lives and how we bring the things that we give to the Lord, that we don't offer him substandard, but we offer him the full part of who we are. Then in chapter 23, Moses is told to give to Israel the delineation of the feasts of Israel. These are the major holidays, the major remembrances for Israel that the Lord lays down. And so the first one in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, is to be the Passover, Pesach. That happens every year, and on this day, the Passover lamb is slain, and then for 7 days the people of Israel eat unleavened bread, matzot in Hebrew, those thin wafers which are not made with yeast, to remember that the people of Israel left Egypt in such a hurry and their deliverance was swift by the power of God. Then after Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 7 Sabbaths, 7 Saturdays are marked out, and coming to, on the 50th day, what's called the Feast of Weeks. This is kind of a feast of first fruits, of the first ingathering of the harvest, and we call it Pentecost, from the Greek word Pentecostia, which means 50, because it's 50 days. Hebrew calls it Shavuot, that means weeks, because it's actually 7 weeks have passed since Passover, and this is the Feast of the Ingathering. Then, coming into the autumn, there are a series of festivals which happen in the month of Tishrei. Tishrei is around September, October. Because Jewish people keep a lunar calendar, that means that sometimes things change in terms of our calendar, in terms of the solar calendar. But in the lunar calendar, on the first day of Tishrei, on the first day of the 7th month, comes the Feast of Trumpets, it's called in Leviticus 23, which Jews normally call Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year, or the new year, because it's the start of a civil year. And it's the way that a lot of things date from the first day of Tishrei. Then on the 10th of Tishrei, on the 10th day of the 7th month, comes the Day of Atonement. It's interesting that in the Hebrew in Leviticus, it's called Yom Kippurim, that means the Day of Coverings, not just one covering. We tend to call this Yom Kippur today, but actually the Hebrew there talks about Yom Kippurim, a day of many coverings, a covering over many things. And then on the 15th day of the month comes the start of the days of Sukkot. Sukkot means really the Feast of Sheds, or the Feast of Dwelling Places. It's a place, it reminds us of the place where God met with his people in the tabernacle itself, but also the fact he called them to live in booths, in tabernacles themselves, in the desert. And this is kept for 7 days, and it's a feast of rejoicing. It says, 7 days you will feast before me. It's just worth noting that before these feasts are laid out, at the beginning of Leviticus 23, the Sabbath is marked out as perhaps the key feast, the key festival for the Jews. As every week, every Saturday, they celebrate the creation. They celebrate the creation God has made, all of the good things that he's put into creation, by joining God in a commemoration of his rest. Have a very good February the 28th.